On today's 700 Club Canada, an interview with Major Shari Russell on her Indigenous identity. Welcome to 700 Club Canada. Isn't this just an amazing week as we take time to listen to and hear from our Indigenous friends across Canada? I don't know about you, but I'm learning a lot, leaning in and listening, and even thinking about ways that I can take action. You know, Jesus says that we are the hands and feet of the gospel. So today I know you're going to be inspired because you're going to hear from Major Shari Russell, and we're going to continue the conversation about honoring Indigenous communities in Canada. Well, she has an incredible story to share. But first, here's a glimpse of her journey. Watch this.
When I was growing up, I tried to hide the fact that I was Indigenous, as people often said derogatory or mean comments about Indigenous people, both adults and children. Even as a young adult in university, I didn't want people to know who I was, as there was still a strong and overt prejudice and lots of stereotypes. To share a bit of my personal story, I was part of the 60 Scoop as I was taken from my home and lived in a predominantly non-Indigenous community. When I was an adult, I reconnected with my biological family, and that's been a really rich and rewarding experience. When it comes to Indigenous peoples, people may assume that there's only one Indigenous culture rather than realizing that there are many different nations within this land with their own cultures, their own language, and traditions. Today, there is a growing awareness of Indigenous peoples and our experience as people have come to hear about Indian residential schools. People think, however, that that's in the past and we just need to get over it. They don't realize we still encounter racism on a daily basis. People don't realize the assimilationist policies and the practices of the past still continue on today in different forms, such as within the child welfare system or the justice system, the education system. We still face systems that are inequitable.
So in mainstream Canadian society, there's a lot of challenges for Indigenous youth. A lot of stereotypes are still going strong, so I think that can be a challenge that a lot of people face. And then with that, I think a lot of people feel shame. So it's a bit difficult to pinpoint specific ways that my heritage has shaped me, because it's kind of impacted all sorts of facets of my life, just like the conversations that I have with people, my style, all sorts of different things. Just the way that I look at the world has changed a little bit. And it's interesting because it wasn't something that was introduced to me right away. So it's something that's kind of grown with me in the later part of my life, just because of my mom's experience with the 60 Scoop and that culture kind of being taken away from her. So it's kind of been going on a journey with her to rediscover our culture.
When I meet new people, they usually don't realize that I'm Indigenous. They just want to know about my family, so I'll tell them that my mom's Indigenous and my dad's from Newfoundland. Growing up, I didn't really know what it meant to be First Nations. We would take a unit in elementary school in like our history class about First Nations people. And that was probably the extent to which I knew about my culture, because my mom didn't really know. It wasn't until I was a teenager that started becoming a part of my family's life. One of the struggles that I think I've gone through and most Indigenous youth and people go through is just trying to find a sense of identity as an Indigenous person, because historically and to this day, our culture has been ripped away from us. So just trying to learn and reclaim that, I think, is a really important thing to do.
What a powerful story. I'd like to welcome Major Shari Russell to the program now. Welcome, Shari. So nice to have you with us.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
And what a wonderful family you have, those fine young men. What a great job they did in telling their story. Thank them for doing that.
I will do.
Tell us a bit of your experience as a child impacted by the 60 Scoop. And some of our viewers, they might not even understand what the 60 Scoop was. So if you could just let us know more about that.
Okay. Well, sadly, mine is not an uncommon story for those that were impacted by the 60 Scoop. A few years ago, I had the privilege of meeting together with some other 60 Scoop survivors and heard the stories that were very similar to mine. Stories of being taken from your home without any knowledge or oftentimes without any real rationale, being placed into foster homes and sometimes multiple foster homes and adoptions. And believe it or not, there were actually a few of us that were adopted more than once in our time. And the purpose of the 60 Scoop was to assimilate us into non-Indigenous life. And so the stories of being discouraged or even prevented from engaging in our culture was heard throughout this group time and time again. And our cultures were often seen as uncivilized or inferior. And so it was something that we needed to give up. And even within the church, I experienced that. I remember one time being discouraged or told not to speak my language and to learn how to speak proper English.
Wow. I'm so sorry. I'm just really sorry to hear that. And for those impacted by it, it's just, it's very sad. And our nation is becoming, I think, thankfully, more aware of what happened. Certainly doesn't change the past, but we are sorry to hear that story. But look at now, I mean, because of your story, and God redeems things in different ways, but you are doing the work for Salvation Army. You're the Salvation Army Indigenous Ministry Consultant. I mean, that's an amazing role and responsibility. As from that role, do you see indicators that there is healing, there is reconciliation taking place in Canada? And if so, what does it look like? And if not, what are some of the barriers maybe still there?
Well, although the word reconciliation has become a little more common, I would say that's partly due to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I'm not sure people always know what reconciliation entails or what we're even reconciling to. And so the concept that was used in the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People speaks about living in right relations with one another. And I love that image because it's speaking about relationships that are built on mutual recognition and respect, reciprocity, and responsibility to one another. And so when we speak about healing, we often focus on Indigenous communities. We talk about reconciliation and healing, and the focus is usually on Indigenous communities. And we don't realize that there's healing needed in what we call the settler society as well, including the church. And that's, healing from racism, from greed, from self-centeredness, from indifference. And so for that healing to occur, there needs to be truth spoken and truth heard and grappling with that truth. And I think in recent days that has become more known within the news and the unmarked graves that are being reported of the children that went to Indian residential schools. And so learning about that truth and taking that responsibility, I think, are needed.
You know what? That is so helpful because reconciliation really refers to two sides. And that is so helpful for all of us to hear that we all need healing. And you can only heal from what you acknowledge as being the truth. Yes. What do you think is still some of the barriers or maybe some things that even our viewers, they wouldn't even know the truth or maybe their perception of Indigenous people is still wrong. What do you still see some of those barriers there?
Yes, I would say part of it is that perception and that lack of education. Our history was taught from one perspective. And so coming to an understanding of our history and all the impact that it's had, not just on Indigenous people, but the relationship as well. And so I don't know if you're familiar with the Kairos blanket exercise, but I encourage all the viewers to participate in one because it gives a different perspective of the history and that relationship and some of the things that have impacted that relationship. So I'd see that kind of as a foundational barrier that we need to address.
Tell us briefly, what is the Kairos blanket exercise? I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, it is developed by Kairos Canada, which is a social justice organization, and they did it in response to the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, and it's a concrete or a tangible exercise that you walk through and you participate in. And so you get a little snippet of the experience of what it was like to be taken from the land, to be removed from your family, to be displaced.
Yeah. Well, that's really helpful. I think that's very good for all of us to look and to experience that. Why is it important, just briefly, for us to engage in National Indigenous History Month?
Well, besides the educational part, I think it's also good for building relationships, but to experience the beauty and the richness of Indigenous cultures and what we bring, not just for show, but actually for the healing of the nations. And I think as Indigenous people, some of those values and those contributions are being recognized, whether it's in science or medicine, some governance, education. Those values are coming through and our teachings are coming through. And so that brings, I think, for the benefit of all, and it brings health and well-being for all. So I think that's one of the pieces I say, engage in, learn about, but also experience.
Yeah.
So go to some of our community celebrations.
Right.
Get to know our people.
That is so helpful. Thank you so much for helping us understand more deeply. God bless you in your work across Canada.
Thank you.
And now, have you ever had a moment where you just wanted to give up? Well, the Hesters have some words of encouragement for you.
God has given me so much through what I thought I had lost. I found out I was pregnant and I wound up losing that baby. And so that was kind of a defining moment for me. It was tough and hard to walk through. I think if I'd had that child, I would have felt like my family was complete and that everything was normal for me and we would have moved on. But that loss birthed a hole in me that God designed, I believe, to fill with this calling for foster care.
Tiffany came to me and said she was really praying about doing foster care, and I immediately said no. She said, I really feel like we should do this. And so I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going on a trip, and I'll pray about it, and you pray about it, and we'll talk as soon as we get home. I went halfway around the world to Thailand, put in a room with another pastor, and out of nowhere, he just started talking to me about foster care, the joys and the struggles of being a foster parent. And when I got home, I knew that that's exactly what God was calling us to do.
Really kind of fighting what I knew God was calling me to do because it's tough. This is too hard. This is too heavy. Like, how am I supposed to love these children and let them go? And that's one of the only times I've audibly heard God's voice in my life. And he said, at what point did your potential pain become more important than their definite need for love? So we got Finn from the hospital as a newborn. He was 2 days old, and we brought him home. He has a lot of issues. His mom used all throughout her pregnancy, and so he had tremors for 8 months. His whole little body would convulse as he was trying to clear the drugs from his system. And because of that, the withdrawals actually preempted what they consider now almost little mini panic attacks. When he feels his emotions beginning to spiral out, his body and his brain relates that to the withdrawals, and he just loses it.
With Finn, it's a lot of behavioral issues, him not being able to talk, and so the communication is very tough. When he wants something, he can't verbalize it just yet, and so he just screams.
He is in 22 hours of therapy a week with occupational therapy, speech therapy, and behavior therapy. He's got, a road ahead of him, but equipped with the right things and obviously covering him in prayer, we believe that he will be completely normal functioning kid.
Josiah, when he was born drug addicted, and so it took him 3 weeks or so in the hospital to be weaned off the drugs.
He is your standard, what they call a drug baby. He would scream for 8 hours a day because his body hurt so bad. He had no muscle control. He, because he was on methadone, in the hospital, he laid on his back for 3 weeks, which caused him to have a flat head in the back, which he later needed a cranial helmet for to correct that. That was very hard. When he would cry like that, there's just nothing you could do. We would just sit in the floor and turn on worship music and hold him tight and rock. That was all you could do. We have to stop and take a deep breath and remember that he's not suffering from these things by his choice. This is because of a choice that someone else made. I firmly believe that God gives you grace for what he's called you to.
The heartache, the hardship is bringing these kids in and loving them like they're your own, but letting them go because they're not.
I believe that we are truly walking out what God has called us to. So in the moments when it gets tough and we want to give up or we want to scream or cry or whatever, like being reminded that this is what God has called us to. It's when things get hard, and they will get hard. It's really important that you're in it together. You still have to continue to invest in your marriage just like you did before, if not more.
We do try to spend a couple of hours together each night after all the kids go down and go to bed.
Our family has changed quite a bit. It definitely requires all of us, working together. I've seen my girls step up in ways that I never, knew they could. I tell people all the time, there's no way we could do what we do without them. When the therapists come, they want to sit in the room with them so that when they go, they know how to respond to Finn's behaviors. And we actually took a day and made sensory bottles and sensory bags for Finn to use in therapy. They were a part of that.
He can just shake them, so it redirects him almost from hitting. It helps him when he steps on the bag, it calms him.
We have a great time as a family. We love the time with the boys, being able to play outside on the swings or down by the water or putting together puzzles and stuff like that.
My favorite part about Finley is he's super funny and sweet at the same time.
He is just silly. He is a lot of fun, and he knows he's funny. And my favorite thing about Josiah is just his sweet demeanor. He is a snuggle bug, and he will smile at you every time you walk in the room. He's precious. You spend more than 2 nights in my house, you get a picture on the wall. That is a very physical reminder. I want to see the faces of these kids every day so that I can be reminded to pray for them no matter where they are in their journey.
You don't know how long these kids are coming in for. You don't know how much of yourself you want to give, but they need it. They need as much as you can give, especially in those moments, because it is truly their darkest moments. It's okay to love and hurt so that they can experience love.
I think that it's not a mere suggestion. I think that God tells us to care for the widows and orphans in James 1:27. And so I think that foster care is a part of that. Not everyone can open up and be a foster family. I totally understand that. But I think that there are ways that you can get involved in the foster care community and help serve that in the ways that do fit your family, whether it's respite care, doing that short term instead of those long-term placements, or whether it's partnering up with, local nonprofits who are helping the system. God has such a heart, for the fatherless, and that's what we're talking about here, is these kids that need family.
I've seen what homelessness does to families. I've seen how it rips apart families. I've seen what it does to children. When I think about the children in this country, in our country, that we let our children go without food and shelter. I had to do something.
Leo Gorsey is Development Director for Vehicles for Changes, a nonprofit organization in Oregon that converts retired school buses into homes for homeless families. For Leo's wife, Julie, this is literally a dream come true.
She literally had a dream, like an actual dream, and woke up and said, oh my God, I had this dream about that we were making these buses for homeless families. She wrote a little blog about the dream she had, and the next day we had a woman who didn't want to be identified from the Midwest who gave us a grant for $25,000 a year for 5 years.
They began working to make a change for Oregon's ever-increasing homeless families.
The fastest growing segment of homeless people right now is homeless parents with children. There are 20,000 homeless children just in the state of Oregon. So we want to stop generational homelessness. We have to stop it now.
The Ashland School District donated the first bus, and the next day the dream was put into motion. Around the same time, David Flood and his family of 5 found themselves homeless after health problems left them unable to pay rent.
Our finances had changed drastically, unexpectedly, and so we ended up camping out a lot. So it was still kind of an adventure. It was still kind of waiting to see what God was going to do on our behalf. And then they closed down the campground, and the 5 of us ended up in our car. Didn't feel safe with such a small space. And then my wife had mentioned she saw Vehicles for Changes and said, I think I should call.
Once they connected, Leo and his team worked hard to make a self-imposed deadline for the Flood family.
You know, Julie kept saying, we got to finish it by Thanksgiving. We got to finish it by Thanksgiving. And I'm running around going, it's never going to happen. And she goes, no, it's got to happen. And I'm going, it's never, no, she goes, it's got to happen. I want them in there by Thanksgiving. So we did finish it.
The day before Thanksgiving 2018, David Flood and his family stepped into their new home on wheels.
We used to sing We All Live in a Yellow Submarine as a family, and like that and song, and never imagined living on a yellow school bus. It's just been pure joy in Jesus Christ that he did this for us. We're very grateful to Vehicles for Changes, because the bus has become the container, you know, the safety for our family, the reason we're still together as a family, and it holds all the difficult and all the joyous times that we go through. And so it's meant a lot for our safety and our protection and holding everything we have as a family. And my son likes to say, when you look at the bus on the outside, it just looks like a regular yellow school bus, but when you go inside, it's like a mansion. It just opens up. So it's all perspective.
Vehicles for Changes has since hired Alex Daniel, a longtime tiny house builder, to scale up production on the next several buses. He says he's thrilled to be involved.
I'm thankful for a feeling of hope and what this might bring. It's a way of connecting with spirit. I get a high when I'm in here doing this kind of work and working with the people that I'm working with doing it. Any way to keep families intact. I think that these buses are just the perfect solution because, you know, working families, they have a job and they've got kids and their kids keep going to school, they don't run away, they stay intact.
As production ramps up on several new buses, David Flood and his family have enjoyed 1 full year in their new home. David and Leo both share a new appreciation for the gift of thankfulness this Thanksgiving.
It's taken a much deeper meaning for us now, and probably will always be related to being grateful for God taking us out of the elements and giving us a safe place to be.
My Thanksgiving gift last year was housing this family. It was housing this family. I couldn't ask for a better gift than that, ever.
Hi, my name is Maravik, and on behalf of Union Gospel Mission, I want to personally thank you. Because of our work together, we've been able to reach seniors, children, and family with the gospel and provide Christmas hampers and food courts to those most in need in the Metro Vancouver area. So partners, thank you so much, and God bless.
Yes, partners, those of you who give to this ministry, thank you so much. You're making a difference. You know, in 2 more days, it marks a very significant moment, 60th anniversary for CBN, Christian Broadcasting Network, which that's the family we belong to. And by supporting 700 Club Canada, you are being part of a ministry that started 60 years ago to reach people with the gospel. It's easy to join. Just call us at 1-855-759-0700. You can start at $20 a month, and you can choose Pledge Express, which makes it really easy to give with automatic monthly withdrawals from your bank account. Won't you join us today in this 60-year celebration, this ministry, as we serve together across our nation?
Abigail had braced herself for this moment, a battle with cancer.
The Grim Reaper was standing at the foot of my bed.
Abigail says she then saw a vision of herself with Jesus in Jerusalem. He walked her past the cross and into the tomb.
And he said, Abigail, when I sat up, you sat up. And then he walked to the entrance of the tomb. And in that moment, I knew.
The Nearness of Heaven, available now. The latest teaching from Gordon Robertson.
Well, I hope that you have been blessed by this week as I've been blessed. I've learned so much. And again today, hearing from Major Shari Russell and her story and just the insight she gave us, I felt challenged, didn't you, to be praying for our Indigenous friends across Canada, but also to take action. Let's participate in this week in a way that we become more part of the truth and part of the reconciliation. There's healing to be done on both sides, and that's a real learning for all of us. So what do you need to heal from? Maybe it's your wrong perspective of Indigenous people. I know for myself, I feel more educated to understand what has not only happened in the past, but what can be different today. So let's join together in making a difference across our nation. And part of that difference is through prayer. And Steph, you've sent a prayer request in. You said, please pray that God would provide me new work and new direction in life. Well, let's pray for Steph. Father, I lift up Steph's request for new work and new direction in life. I pray that you would meet her every need, and she would just give you so much praise because you are the great provider. Lord, I pray for Indigenous people across our nation. First of all, they would know how loved they are, that barriers would be broken down, that reconciliation truly would take place in all of our hearts. And Lord, that many people would turn to you as a result of truth and reconciliation. Thank you for the gospel. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for your gift of salvation. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Well, 1 Corinthians 15:58 says this, therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Well, that's a good word for all of us. Thanks for watching.
To contact us, visit 700club.ca.
On tomorrow's program, Indigenous influencers and leaders from across Canada join us for the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation.